Thank you, Rob. Thank you for a very Rob intro there. Some great predecessors on this evening, clearly. Probably bigger audiences than there were tonight for Rem and people like that. Anyway, nice to be here. Rob's explained already who I am. What I want to do really is kind of set the agenda, which then introduces Kelvin, and he will tell you about how he's approaching Birmingham city centre. I want to talk to you about why we're doing it, and secondly, the kind of magnitude of the task. And then thirdly, just some ideas around interconnectivity, which I think is a fundamental of urban design. So moving on. And by the way, this has crashed every time I've opened it so far this evening, so I've made a pact with Kelvin that I'll stop when it stops and then he can carry on. About a year and a half ago, a number of us in the City Council were thinking that Birmingham really probably wasn't punching its weight in terms of prestige, its world status, competing within the UK, within Europe, and much wider. I often say Birmingham is actually a portal to the rest of the world because I think after London it has one of the most mixed ethnicities, and you can actually get to any part of the world from the populace of Birmingham by language and culture and food and all those kind of things. So we commissioned Michael Parkinson, the other one, not the one that touches your knee on a Saturday night on the telly, from Liverpool John Moores University, who had just done the State of the Cities report for ODPM, as it was then, a year and a bit ago, to come and really look more closely at Birmingham. And like any consultant, you tell him the things that you want to hear said back to you and the politicians and the stakeholders within the city. So that was the kind of starting point. So we were saying where would we go next? And really I think this is quite important because I'll say in a minute what the master plan is, because it isn't just about a great spatial idea. It's absolutely underpinned by that, but it's a number of other things as well. And our starting point was how we maximise investment. There's a lot of investment activity, as there is across the UK at the moment, in Birmingham and in the city centre in particular. And obviously the remit and it's incumbent upon a local authority to make sure that the wealth that's created in the engine room of the city centre is shared more widely across the whole city. And it's a city of pretty much 10 miles north to south, so it's a big place, really. Indisputably the capital of the region, the West Midlands region, which stretches from Stoke down to Hereford and so on, and east-west as well. Unlike the East Midlands, it has several capitals, if you like. We are singularly the one capital. So we have a very important regional role as well as national, and obviously increasingly aspire to be a global city. We have anticipated through government advice over the next 5 to 10 years a population increase of 10%, of about 100,000. Of course, in terms of jobs and education and housing, those are pretty big challenges. And the city centre naturally has its part to play there. The 40,000 figure is probably a little bit, well, it's definitely a guess, but that's just looking at the kind of planning application, the quantum of space that we foresee in the city centre, and therefore the number of jobs it will ultimately create. And obviously the third point there is that Birmingham is a city that continues to go through the post-industrial era of change and all that pertains to that, which is obviously very significant. Our strengths are those things. I don't plan on reading them out. You can read, but those are things that are recognised qualities of Birmingham. But there are sort of big challenges as well. And Michael Parkinson was flattering in the sense that he said we had a brilliant first act in regeneration. And as Rob said, that really did sort of start or re-energised after Highbury, which was initially held in '88 and had several sessions after that. And the breaking of the concrete collar and the streets and squares initiatives and the Buds initiative, tall buildings policy, things like that came forward at that time. We did pretty well, actually, and people still come from all over the world and look at Brindley Place, Victoria Square, Centenary Square, those kind of things that probably most of you know, whether you visited or not, the centre of Birmingham. But I have to say, from an urban design perspective, I'm pretty frustrated because we've really dined out on those things a little too long, and I've been around to certainly Newcastle, Manchester, Leeds and Sheffield, particularly Sheffield, because I spent 8 years in Sheffield. That's really transformed in terms of its urban design connectivity, its qualities of place, and the quality of the finish and the design is really high. And ours are actually starting to wear out because they've been around a long time, and we haven't done new ones for quite a long time. We've got some very ambitious plans for city centre parks, which I'm not going to really talk about this evening, but which some of you know about. So I think it's really about, well, what is our second act? What is it all about? Let's just see if this is happy to move on. Here we are. So as I was hinting at earlier, the master plan is actually about a multiplicity of skills, having helped draft the brief with Michael Parkinson. It's fairly complex, and we went through a very long procurement over the summer months around delivery, urban design, economics, elements of branding, and so on and so on. So all of the firms that were bidding were multidisciplinary practices, often with a family of colleagues with them, and obviously Urban Initiatives won that job. Because it's just as important, taking the third point on there, that we have a delivery method, we have a delivery vehicle, and it delivers the business plan for the city centre. So it's about the economic, property, financial development, public and private mechanisms which allow it all to go on. And I think as urban design has matured, we all understand that those kind of mechanisms are wound into the vision that is also absolutely necessary as well. So zooming in on Google Earth into Birmingham city centre, and my Z mapping model of the whole city centre there, looking at a true aerial view. So that's what we're dealing with, and that's actually 800 hectares. What Highbury dealt with in 1988 was 80 hectares, so a 10 times or 1,000% difference in scale of the city centre and what we now regard as the city centre. And hence the need, I think, primarily for the master plan thinking. And that's just to remind you, it is Birmingham. We have a massive series of very big roads. We've broken down our concrete collar, which is the thing that contained those 80 hectares, pretty effectively, actually. There's one or two little bits left, very near the office where I work, where the planners are housed. So the planners are still reminded of the mistakes they've made in the past. It'll be the last thing to be broken out. But this is a sort of typical way of looking at the major rings. I mean, I always find roundabouts probably the most destructive places to sort of move across and perceive. And then this major route into the city centre, and at the top of the slide there is the absolute core of the city. And the sort of middle ground on that shot is some of the stuff that we're dealing with, and I'd like to talk a little bit more about that later on. And I like these oblique aerial shots because Rob said that Birmingham's pretty complex. I mean, it's got no driving spatial principle. It's got no driving period of history. Its social history is indicated in its architecture. It's a place of it's a nonconformist place, and it's built. It's quite a young city as well, and the railway therefore is at the very centre of the place. It's not a historic city where the railway system had to sort of be placed by the Victorians outside the core. So it's a pretty complex place to deal with. Another shot there of the sort of mix and match of the whole thing that we have there. Because I'm from Birmingham in London, I hope you just allow me this slight indulgence. This is a cross section of the Z mapping at the true horizontal, and at the top is the absolute city core, and you can hopefully tell by the density of buildings there. And then if you were to line all of these up, the bottom shot is the furthest to the right, if you sort of literally levelled them all out. And Spaghetti Junction, Junction 6 of the M6, is out to the north, the northeast of the city centre. And that shot shows you the view across Spaghetti, actually surrounding quite a bit of greenery. It's actually on 559 concrete columns, and it's 7 miles of tarmac. But you can see then that loop that takes you right to the city core, and again the cluster of tall buildings there. And this is my indulgence. When the future happens and London actually finds itself underwater, the only bit of Birmingham that's going to be flooded is the land around Spaghetti Junction. So it would be a road junction in a lake, which is quite appealing to me. And that's the Londoners leaving by helicopter to get up to Birmingham when it happens. I can't remember the film, but you'll recognise it. So back to the city plan. This emphasises the point I've already made. What you see there, looped by white, is 800 hectares. And if I just move this on here, because it's Birmingham, we still define our city centre, sadly, by a road. The outer ring road, that's the thing that defines the 800 hectares of space. And the thing I want to talk about this evening is, let's just see, it's very slow to move on, so just bear with me, is a series of quarters. Because I think we've actually got the city core sorted out, which is the central business district and primarily retail and cultural facilities. That's not badly sorted out. It needs a bit of refreshing, as I said earlier. But when we start to look at the 800 hectares of space, this 10 times multiplier of that volume, both politically and in terms of movement, in terms of development, in terms of design, and delivering it, there's quite a multiplicity of different qualities and characters and densities and usage and intensity of usage and everything else. So we have a series of quarters that kind of donut around the city core. East side, which is a big obsession of mine, that's a sort of scorched earth regeneration, certainly to the north of the Euston line. Then we go around to Digbeth and the Irish Quarter, and then we have Park Central, which is a new development which I'll show in a minute. We have the Convention Quarter, which is part of our stretch to the west during post-Highbury, which created the Symphony Hall, the International Convention Centre, the National Indoor Arena, and so on. And then finally, in a way our most sort of precious quarter, is the Jewellery Quarter. So that's our way of kind of describing the character and areas outside the actual core. So all of that collectively make up the 800 hectares. So those are on white there, which I think shows reasonably clear on the screen, are the road routes that radially come in. And you can see they then circulate around the city centre core. Very, very few of those easily penetrate that core. But what they do is penetrate and divide up all of those quarters. They're convenient in terms of boundaries, but not really very convenient in terms of what you might regard as the necessary interconnectivity between all these things. The 800 hectares is okay being radially coming into that, because once you've got off your bus or the train, you can move around. Within 10 minutes, you can move around the whole of that. But actually, when we start to talk about the centre as a whole, as the 800 hectares, where if you were to get off a certain bus or a train, say, down towards East Side, and you happen to work or want to visit the Convention Quarter, then actually it's a 25, 30-minute walk. And also how these things kind of work in a concentric way instead of a radial way is quite a big challenge. And I'll show you some of the qualities and some of the challenges that we have ahead of us in all of this. So obviously the ring road works very effectively. We have very powerful traffic engineers still in Birmingham. And the radial routes work well as I've described. And the challenge, I think it's the next slide, is what we might term interconnection between the core and also between those quarters. Some of the barriers, obviously the roads, but also clearly, as in many cities, the above and below ground divisions that the railway routes actually created. Sorry, it's a little slow. These are pretty hefty graphics, these. So what I'm going to do until the thing falls over again is show you some of the qualities in these quarters, pretty briefly, hopefully, once the the Mac's running well. These are the 5 that I want to quickly snapshot with you this evening, and I'll hand over to Kelvin. Those are the names of them that will mean something to a number of you, I think, in the audience, because there are some familiar faces. And I'm going to take you around all of these. I think we start with St Chad's Queensway, which is up towards a sort of university area, Children's Hospital. And I'm just going to simply show you, I'm not going to describe all these to you, some of the either facilities or qualities or assets or historic elements of these places. This happens to be around Aston University and Birmingham City University. But there's the one part of the division that's created right on the edge of those campuses. A massive road at ground level, an even bigger road, which happens to be the A38, linking Spaghetti to the southwest of the city. Massive obstructions to get through between those places. So that's an example of how, almost post-Highbury, we've now got our own concrete strident moves rather than the collar. The next one is Digbeth, which is a particular favourite of mine, because this is the Bond warehouse, which is a working workspace restoration of a bonded warehouse right on the canal. And this is part of the park edge in East Side, obviously in the spring, one of the listed pubs, the canal basin at favourite shot of mine here, that was at the Bond. This is Warwick Bar, where 2 of the canal systems actually connected. You can see where the canal narrows off by that warehouse there. Fabulous series of very, very simple but fantastically robust and great buildings that we think we can come to further use as a creative quarter and so on. And so, nice background, Victorian, Edwardian buildings around the place in Digbeth. The custard factory, 1 or 2 shots of that, rather colourful place. Well over 100 creative businesses just in that one existing building, and the new building is the blue one on the right there with the sculpture and so on. So great places. And I just dropped that shot in because I always think it looks like the Midwest of America, really, apart from the rotunda sticking out on the horizon there. This kind of grain silo thing, which is actually part of an old concrete work, and the old railway lines, which is right alongside the New Street to Euston line. And this is actually how East Side was, and it's already now getting developed up and out, and to, as I talked about, the scorched earth policy, a lot of new master plan, which I know some of you are involved with in building out. But here we are. This is Digbeth High Street. It's actually a proper road. It's a proper street. It's a historic street. It exists at ground level, but it was doubled in width, probably in the 60s. I'm not quite sure. So you have remaining historic buildings on the right and pretty awful sheds and 50s and 60s blocks on the left. I think there's another shot actually of that. Yeah, these are a few more assets in the area, and then one of the adjacent sites. This is a horrible photograph of proving my point. Really, nobody actually walking around. There's one person by the lamppost on there. Look, there's a 20-acre wholesale markets. That grey the gable elevation you see there is the wholesale markets, and then this road that was created to snake and move around very fast around the whole thing, and it's an extremely alien pedestrian environment. So that's adjacent to Digbeth High Street. This is the other shot I was looking for. So the new building's on the right there, and there's probably a mile of railing, and it's double railing all the way through, and you just these certain points. You see this pelican crossing here where you can actually cross it. Now this is a road, not a street, and we need to make it a great street in the future. And I actually do think that's achievable pretty soon, actually. And I do think there'll be a real case for increased economic, social and wealth activity once the interconnectivity across that street's created. This is Bristol Street, which is another part of the A38. Quite proud of this. This is a design-led mixed-use scheme, but really residentially led, public and private, between the City Council and Crest Nicholson and an RSL. And it's focused on two small park spaces, and this is obviously an aerial view of one of those. So some great, very contemporary assets that have been created around Bristol Street. That's another view of the park there. And then here's the street, and it's literally a 6-lane motorway. It's very, very wide, and the city core is just to the right. The gay quarter, Chinese quarter to the right, and to the left is the scheme I've just shown you. And yet again, here we are with, look at that, another subway that just is incredibly uninviting to help these things connect. So a whole new community or revitalised community on the left, and then great existing cultural facilities on the right, and they are detached by the system of roads. So I think you're sort of getting my point, really, about how all of these do or don't connect together. And finally, this is the jewellery quarter, and you see some of the assets of that quarter. Well over 100 listed buildings there, some great Victorian cemeteries, and a lot of retail in the existing Victorian buildings. Not a great shot, but reminds you the canal runs right through the middle of the quarter. And then right the other side of the road I'm referring to here, pretty low density and pretty awful, actually. Housing, little cul-de-sac here we can see. Again, these people actually now live, as far as we're concerned, in the city core, but they are detached from it from all sorts of means. And this also represents some of the wards outside that core as well. And these are even lower density, as you see there. And it's crashed, but there we are. There was only one more shot to show you of an awful road there, so I'm going to close that. And I think I've made my point, really. And the final point, really, was around the only bit of Kevin Lynch I remember, I have to confess, when I was at Sheffield in the 80s at universities, was the issue of roads and crossing of roads, and how roads could be very, very inhospitable. And I think I'm demonstrating to you that in Birmingham, whilst the concrete collar is successfully largely gone, the road system remains a great challenge. Thank you.